and welcome back to BookTube with Amy. This is going to be my most recent weekly wrap up. So I am no filming in my usual spot, as you will have noticed. I'm surrounded by DVDs instead of being surrounded by books. So we're finally getting some progress on the library, which is really exciting, and I will have another part of my library glow up series coming out as soon as we have further progress. But for the foreseeable, I will be filming from the living room because the library is empty at the minute and it's very echoey and I have no books. So it was quite a struggle for me and Simon to pull out all the books that we might want to read over the next month, and I've got like a stack about this size on my bedside table, just in case, because I like panicked. But so we will be filming for here for a wee while. It is what it is. I am feeling like I'm getting into a bit of a reading slump. And I know I am not the only one. I feel like it has just been like the creeping death of BookTube recently, where everybody's starting to feel a wee bit slumpy. And my work is just mental at the minute. So my reading is definitely going to slow down. I think it'll be lucky if I'm reading 2 books a week now compared to my usual sometimes 3 or 4, but it is what it is. So I read The Restless Dark by Erica Waters, and this was an arc that I received from Harper Teen, which I was absolutely buzzing about. So this is about 3 characters, and as opposed to real people, obviously they're characters. 3 girls, and they all go to a like podcast convention type thing, and it's a true crime podcast where they're obsessed with this one killer who jumped off a cliff and his body was never discovered. So there's like loads of theories that he might still be alive or that he died, and his bones are still out there. Loads of different theories, and the whole point of this podcast meet-up thing is so that they can try and find this killer's bones and prove once and for all that he is really dead, and you know, whoever finds his bones gets a big cash prize. So we have Lucy, and Lucy was the last victim of the Cloud Kiss killer, and she managed to get away. The police arrived just as he was about to kill her when he eventually jumped off the cliff, and so she is obviously living her life absolutely terrified that he might still be alive, and she has joined this even though she is underage and, you know, she shouldn't really be there, but she wants definitive evidence that he's dead so she can crack on and live her life. We've got Carolina, and she is a really big fan of the podcast, but she is struggling to figure out who she is as a person, and she can't tell if she really likes this podcast just because she's into true crime, and if she really likes this podcast because there's something sinister inside her and she maybe feels a wee bit of a kinship to these killers. And then we have Maggie, and she is a psychology student, and she is going basically to write a paper on the type of people who are into true crime and who are into podcasts and who would go to an event such as this. And the 3 of them end up teaming up. There is something that happens quite early on in the book which forces the creators of this event to have everybody grouped together in no less than groups of 3. And so the 3 of the girls end up teaming up to find the killer. Now this is going to go into spoiler territory, so, you know, click on to the next book if you didn't want to have this book spoiled for you. I will just say just now before you head away, this was a 3-star read for me, but if you want to find out why it's 3 stars, then I'm going to need to go into spoilers because I can't no spoil this book and talk about what I hated. But I don't think that the characters of the girls were written particularly well in this, to be honest. I feel like they were all pretty interchangeable, and if it didn't tell me up the top of each chapter who was narrating that chapter, like, I probably wouldn't know. Obviously as the story goes on, like, you find out every character's backstory, and then it's easier to tell them apart because obviously you know what has happened. But in terms of their behaviours, in terms of their like thoughts and feelings, I didn't feel like the characters were explored very well. I think that this is a book that probably like has totally missed all the perks of a book that uses multi-POV, because the points of view weren't distinctive enough, and so it didn't really add anything into the story other than to use it like as plot progression, which I personally never really enjoy. It's one of my big gripes with quite a lot of books, is when the points of view aren't distinct enough for me to care, because I'm a really character driven reader. So if something is just evidently there to progress the plot and it doesn't actually add anything in terms of character value, it's always just a bit of a turn off for me. Might not bug you, but for me personally that's a big no-no. The other thing that really annoyed me about this book is how it ends, right? So the ending's garbage, like hot steaming bin juice, and it's really disappointing because I was really enjoying it up until then. So there's a couple of twists and turns in this book that you're not really expecting, and although I am not a huge thriller reader, I picked this up because it sounded a wee bit more like it was horror-y, and I really like true crime. You know, I'm a Bailey Sarian addict, so I thought that that whole aspect to it was going to really add something into it that I would enjoy. If it didn't have that aspect, maybe this isn't a book I would have chosen to read. But the twists and turns, they weren't hugely original. I wasn't really expecting them, but when they happened I was like, fair enough. I mean, it's fairly standard thriller fodder. That was quite a tongue tie there. But then at the end there's like the biggest twist. So basically Maggie and Lucy end up together, and Carolina is jealous because she quite likes Lucy, and so then Maggie is telling Lucy like, oh, Carolina's not who she says she was, blah blah blah, like, you know, she's a bit of a psycho, and so Lucy's like, oh my god, can I believe it? And then obviously it turns out that Carolina isn't the psycho, and she has been left for dead in the woods by Maggie, who is in fact the psycho. So like, that's the fairly standard bit. But then it turns out that everybody who is at this podcast thing has went a bit mental because of the mist. And the place where the Cloud Kiss killer was killing his victims, it's then like, well, was he a fucked up serial killer, or was he just affected by the mists? No explanation as to why the mists made people mental. No theories, no suggestions, no reasons whatsoever. You know, there isn't then a reveal at the end, like where it's something supernaturally or whatever, which I could get on board with. None of that. There is no suggestion that we will get any information. And so for me, this just felt like the author didn't know how to wrap the book up and went, fuck it, we'll just make the mists the bad guy. And then that's how the book ended, which was hugely disappointing. So that's why it's a 3-star for me. The ending was just atrocious. I probably wouldn't even recommend this to you unless you don't care about how a book ends. But aye, it was a 3-star. Like, it wasn't the worst thing I've ever read in the world. The ending was, but we move on. Cue me never getting another arc for Harper Teen. And then I read The Archive of the Forgotten by A.J. Hackworth, and this is the second book in the Hell's Library series that I started at either the end of last year or the beginning of this year. It's all a bit muddled, but I had to read this as part of my I seriously need to read this. I mean, I do, but I seriously need to finish this challenge, is what I was trying to say. This was quite mixed for me, to be honest. I loved the first one. Library of the Unwritten was a solid 5-star for me. I loved the characters, loved the world, loved all the mythology woven throughout it. This was lacking something for me, and I think it was the character friendships and the found family element, which was something that I really enjoyed about the first book. It's going to be difficult for me to talk about this book without going into spoiler territory. So again, like, if you do not want this book spoiled, bolt. It was a 3-star, and I'll tell you why. So, in between the first book and the second book, there's like a bit of a library reshuffle, which has caused a wee bit of a fallout. So Claire, who is your main librarian for the first book, is now not head librarian, and her assistant Brevity is now the main librarian. And I think that this was potentially Claire's choice because of everything that happened in the first book. She felt like she really failed the library, and so she wanted to do that anymore and have the library be in somebody else's hands, and so she obviously chose Brevity, which, like, cool, I love Brevity too, like, I am absolutely grand with that. But Claire, like, totally pushes Brevity away so that Brevity can learn to stand on her own 2 feet. But, like, instead of just having an actual communication with her and saying, like, look, listen, you can't always rely on me, you're going to need to figure things out for yourself, run the library how you want, like, we can still be pals, but professionally I'm taking a step back. Like, obviously this book heavily relies on miscommunication trope, which, like, I fucking hate. So Brevity and Claire, like, aren't talking really in this book, and there's an issue that arises within the library that sort of involves Claire and sort of involves Brevity, and so they need to work on it together to try and, like, get it solved. But they didn't work on it together, they both just go about their own devices and didn't really talk for most of the book, which was aggravating, because if they just had a conversation about each of their findings and each of their plans, they could have probably resolved this, like, quite swiftly, which I appreciate would have probably made a poor book. But I just hate miscommunication as a trope. Just have a fucking conversation like an adult. I don't understand why it's so difficult. And you can have, like, tension, and, you know, you can have plot development, and you can have really interesting character scenarios without having to use miscommunication. Like, it's just fucking shit. So I was so annoyed at that. And then 2 of my other favourite characters for the first book are Hero and Remy, and they end up teaming up in this book. Like, so Hero is, well, a character for a book, and Ramiel is the angel, and they form, like, an unlikely bond in the beginning of this book because Brevity and Claire aren't working together, that they decide that they need to work together to try and get it solved and essentially step up and fix it. And, like, I get that, and I do really like them both as characters, but I just don't know if I see the 2 of them working together like this. And so then that annoyed me, because again I felt like that was just being forced and, like, stemming for the miscommunication. Now, the 2 of them end up together in this book, and, like, I love it. This book is very queer, this series is very queer, and I am here for that 1000%. I absolutely ship them, no question. They are brilliant, like, they are so opposite that their interactions are so funny, like, and I think that watching them realise that they had feelings for each other in this was just, like, so joyful, because it's like, I know something you don't know, like, because you totally know before they do, and I really loved that, and I really ship them. I'm just annoyed that their relationship had to come about, like, because of the miscommunication. Like, I would have far loved more, that isn't a sentence that makes sense, I would have loved it far more if AJ Hackworth just wrote, like, a good storyline for them that wasn't just like, oh well, I guess we're going to need to work together, oh, and now we're in love. You know what I mean? I just didn't really enjoy that. That being said, I still really liked the world, and I liked being back with these characters, and I did like the characters even if I didn't like how split up they were. But this definitely suffered middle book syndrome for me. I think that it's very clear to see where the last book is going, and I wish it had just been a duology and we could have had this be far more condensed, with the third one and had the first one be as strong as it was, and maybe the second one would have been as strong as well. But unfortunately this was a 3-star for me. I am going to continue and I am going to finish the trilogy because I do really enjoy them and I really like the worlds, but just wasn't what I was expecting going into it, unfortunately. Thank you very much for watching. Hopefully you're enjoying everything that you are reading at the moment. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye!